So, Ray, tell us your title.
I am the executive director of the Highlands County Citrus Growers Association. Been serving in that capacity for the last 21 years
Oh
now.
my gosh, has it been that long?
Yes.
And I knew you win.
Yeah, and I mean, actually was involved when we started the association in 1990 and served as either the third or fourth president back in the early 90s, 1994, I think. So really been involved with the association for quite a while.
Oh my gosh. So tell us why, first of all, that Highlands County Citrus Growers Association, why was it formed? I mean, what was the impetus for that?
There was a recognition, by the men and women who had property in Highlands County that they needed to take precautions to make sure that not only did they have the ability to pursue growing citrus, farm, whatever,
Right.
but they also wanted to protect their secondary land values and make sure that they didn't forfeit longer-term development rights, those kinds of things. And they realized that in our area, they wanted to be very, very involved in the decision-making processes as Highlands County. And we've seen now over that last 30 years, as Highlands County has evolved in more and more of an urbanizing community,
Yes.
that it's important that we have a seat at the table to make sure when it comes to comp plans and land development regulations and stuff like that, that we're working hand in hand with elected officials and their staffs to make sure that agriculture is properly represented, because it's often not that anyone's doing anything intentionally negative towards ag, but sometimes it's just inadvertent policy that no one understands the unintended consequences. And so that was the initial intent of the association.
Right.
That is still our primary intent. And then obviously we assist our growers with information dissemination. We have about 140 grower members and roughly 200 associate members that help support the mission of the association. So there's kind of a long-winded answer to your
No,
question.
that's fine. I mean, it's, as long as I've been around, you don't always think about how things started up and
Right.
why, and that really helps us understand that. So,
And we're, now moving into different generations, and
Right.
at times it's hard for me to admit that I'm getting older,
we are the older generation,
yeah,
honey.
exactly. And so, the men and women that were very active and, 30 years ago, a lot of them now, I work for a board that's in some cases their children or, members of their family. And I think that's still kind of the beauty in Highlands County. We still have a lot of the families that have been involved, from
Right.
everywhere from the Griffin family and the Crutchfields and the Smokes and the Reynolds. And so there are, I didn't even cover them all obviously, but a number of families that have continued, some of them since, for the last 100 years in Highlands County,
Wow.
to be citrus players down there.
So who were some of the movers and shakers that you remember working with?
Well, obviously, initially, there were people like, Marvin Kahn
Right.
was initially very, very active, and Charlie Reynolds and Ed Smoke. And the good thing is that all those gentlemen are still with us. Most of them aren't involved day to day in our operations. And then, we've obviously, we've lost some folks, the Bert Harris Jr. and
yeah.
Hugh Veely and some others that have passed. But so it's always kind of a challenge. I got a board member now that his father was on the board, his grandfather was on the board. So I mean, in the Crutchfield family. So we're seeing that, and we're obviously seeing companies, morph as they, some of them getting more into citrus, some into less. But
Right.
I mean, I think the good thing is they've been consistently involved in Highlands County and making sure that they ensure the footprint that they have there.
So Hugh Veely brings back, I'm actually one of the members who have received the Hugh Veely Award at the golf tournament they used to do. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about Hugh. Do you remember much about Hugh at all? Or?
No, I mean, he was a guy that obviously had a vision for what that company was doing at the time. And, very involved in had a major packing house there in Highlands County. Now we no longer have a packing house in
What
Highlands
was the name
County.
of that packing house?
Lake Placid Groves.
Okay.
And Lake Placid Groves is now the Howard Fertilizer Plant. So
Oh, wow.
we've transitioned from that being a packing house to a major fertilizer production facility. So, he was just one of those guys that had a very clear vision for what was, one of the few in our area that stood out as someone involved in the fresh fruit industry, since Highlands County is primarily a processed fruit,
Okay.
primarily a round orange processed food area. So, it's he was just he was he's a good guy. I guess that's it probably sounds corny, but maybe that's the best thing. He was a very dependable, good guy, a guy that you could depend on for sound advice and thought process.
Right. So he was a funny guy too, if I
Right,
remember correctly.
yeah.
He was a lot of fun.
And then you had guys like Bert Harris Jr. Who'd served as county agent and a citrus grower, cattleman, and he had that wide range of experience from being a legislator to being an extension agent to being a producer himself.
Right.
And so, you kind of miss some of those guys that had that wide range of experience. A guy like Marvin Kahn, who frankly I haven't seen Marvin in a year or so. His company's still out there, but
Right.
I don't think Marvin's real involved day to day. But there was a guy that sat on the Citrus Commission and wanted to be very, very involved in everything and
Absolutely.
had an idea about everything. So and that was kind of a neat thing. You had guys, Ed Smoke. I happen to live in the same neighborhood. Ed was on the Citrus Commission, and
Right.
now, his nephew John III is running the day-to-day operations of that company and sits on the Citrus Commission. So we kind of see that legacy being passed on. That folks like that, want to be very involved, and we're very blessed in Highlands County to have a lot of men and women. The John Smokes, the Ned Hancocks, the Marty McKennas, that are very, John Barbins, that are very involved with the commission, with Citrus Mutual,
Right.
Doing a lot of stuff on behalf of the industry.
Now, do you still have a lot of acreage in Highlands County now, or is the development taking it over, or how has that growth changed over the years with the industry?
Really, Highlands County is one of those areas that a year or two ago, actually, we gained some acreage again. So we really haven't lost acreage to the degree that a lot of other places have. And I think basically Highlands County still makes up about 13 or 14% of the citrus industry acreage in the state. So we have right at about 60,000 acres of citrus still in Highlands County. And we have companies, I think, companies like Catrali have planted 3,000 or 4,000 new acres just in
Wow.
the last couple of years. And I mentioned John Barbin. Another gentleman that was very influential historically was Bob Barbin.
Senior?
Bob
Right.
Barbin Senior, and
Mhm.
obviously Bobby Junior too. But
Right.
but Bob, I remember going and just visiting with him. And again, there was a guy that had
He was
come
one of
from
my
both
faves. I love
sides
him.
and
Yeah.
stuff, and but had a very good perspective. And and now his children are very, very involved in the industry, and all three of his sons that are involved in the day-to-day are very, very involved, whether it's with CRDF or Mutual or actually growing citrus. And so, you think about, Bobby, John, and Billy. They are three completely different types of
Yes,
people.
they are.
And it's very interesting that their father was able, with those multiple different types of personalities, to say, okay, there's many different roles in the industry that people have to play. And so I think that kind of goes to the leadership he had. And he was another one of the early founders and board members of our association back in the early 90s.
So after the freezes had happened, that decade of the 80s with all the freezes, was that maybe what started it because of all the different changes that were going on? Because did you lose a lot of acreage in those freezes in the 80s?
I think, what happened in primarily 1985, 1989,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that we lost much acreage. I think there was a recognition that one had to think beyond citrus.
Got it. Okay.
Unfortunately, now we're reminded in 2020, 21, 22 that you really have to be thinking, okay, is my citrus industry production, is it sustainable? Do I need to think about transitioning to something else? Is there something else in agriculture I want to transition to? Do I need to transition out of agriculture? And that's frankly what some of the associations doing right now is helping people as they kind of look at what their options are. How do we think about what our options are, moving forward? And we're now seeing things in Highlands County. So we have some CUPS projects,
Okay.
and we have some people that are doing some high density plantings, and so we continue to see the innovation. I'm very encouraged because I see a lot of new trees going in the ground.
Is that from the
And,
craft program?
I think both with the craft program and, there's some big companies down in the southern part of the county that pushed up hundreds of acres, and new trees have gone in the ground even in the last couple of months.
Right.
And so, whenever I see new trees going in the ground, I think, okay, someone is thinking, what am I going to do for the next 10, 15 years? And so I think that was encouraging. Like I said earlier, it was encouraging to see that we were actually gaining some acreage in Highlands County, or certainly we were replanting acreage and holding very steady, and we weren't seeing the declines that we're seeing in other places in the
Right.
state.
That's good to hear. So, in terms of your upbringing of citrus, were you in the citrus industry beforehand?
No. My family had property in Highlands County since the 1920s,
Okay.
but I actually grew up down in West Palm Beach. Kind of got introduced to citrus during college, way back, and had some friends and fraternity brothers that were in citrus, and took a few classes in that. And when I got out of school, I actually came down to work on our family ranch until I found a real job in 1981. And so there might be some that would claim, okay, it's been 41 years, are you gonna, do something? But no, I really kind of fell in love with being involved with agriculture, enjoyed being in Highlands County,
Right.
met my future wife, got married, had kids. And once you raise kids in a 3 traffic light town like Lake Placid, it's kind of hard then to
You never go
move
back.
to the big city, So I've really enjoyed being involved, in the cattle industry, in the citrus industry. And so I kind of got our family in the citrus industry. And, one time we were never a big grower, but at one time we grew and had, 450, 500 acres. And it
Right.
kept me and a couple of guys busy. And ultimately we sold most of that property to the state of Florida to be bird, bear, and bunny habitat.
Oh wow.
And the foundation actually still has some of that Citrus Grove property is still doing some stuff with University of Florida Foundation and
Okay.
all that. So it's been interesting, and so I enjoyed being in the production side of it, and I'm really enjoying the last 20 plus year and being in the advocacy side of it. And feel very blessed to work with the men and women I do, representing them, working on their behalf.
Is there anybody in particular that stands out that from the Highlands County area that should be in the Hall of Fame that isn't in there that you can think of?
Well, of course, I think there's a lot of men and women that probably should be in the Hall of Fame from Highlands County, but I think like we were talking about earlier, there's just a lot of these families that collectively have brought an awful lot to the industry. And so, sometimes I know the Hall of Fame honors an individual.
Right.
And at times I think maybe there should be this category of a family, because I tend to think, especially now that we're 3-4 generations, maybe more deep in some of these family things, it's really more than one man or woman. It's really the combined efforts of brothers and sons and nephews and
Right.
stuff like that. So,
I know we've had a couple where it's a spouse that they would want to do too, and our bylaws say one.
right.
So that's been one of those things that's been something we need to take into consideration for future.
Well, and I've mentioned, there's folks, the Crutchfield family. There's been a half a dozen of them involved in the business, and they've all played a role. The Smoke family. There's been, 4 or 5 men that have been involved in that, from the original John Smoke to John Smoke Jr. and Ed Smoke, and now John the Third, the late Mason Smoke. And so I guess that's why I tend to think about it as these families that are really involved, that each of them brings maybe something new to the industry when it's their turn to lead.
Right. Well, what we should do is look at getting something down on tape, on video, for these different families. So
Right.
maybe we get together and
Right.
and at least do a oral history presentation with them to try to preserve their knowledge while it's available.
Well, and I mean, again, that we probably ought to be talking to these subsequent generations about
Right.
the lessons they learned from their parents and their grandparents and what they brought. And I mean, I'll use the Crutchfields as the example. I mean, they came to Sebring, Highlands County, in the 1920s, and they were the early pioneers for that area, and they're still in the citrus business today and doing a wide range of things. The Smoke started growing citrus in the Greater Lake Placid area probably also almost 100 years ago, and
Right.
are doing that. So that's why when I think about it, it's hard for me to almost say, well, let's just pick one of them. It really has been this collective family effort. And I'm sure that's the case for the vast majority of the men and women recognized in the Hall of Fame, is that they could not have done it without a
Without
very
their family
supportive
behind them.
family or
Right.
spouse or
Yeah.
those kinds of things. And I imagine, as I've sat in the things, they always are very careful to thank, those folks. And again, we talk about the Barbins.
Right.
Same thing. I think Bob Barbin got into it through his father-in-law.
Yes.
He's now, passed that down to his sons and daughters. They've now, those young people, I say young people, hell, they're all in their 50s or 60s. They're about as my age. But, they now have children that are moving into it. And, so it's so often now what I'm seeing is in Highlands County, those 4th and 5th generations are getting ready to do, and they've got new challenges that their
absolutely.
family members, didn't have to deal with. Their family members had to deal with challenges. And I remember, even in the brief 30 or 40 years I've been involved, that there were things that were going to be the end of the industry that are just an afterthought now. So,
Yeah.
leaf miner was going to be the ruination of the industry, and who gives a hoot about leaf miners anymore? Canker was going to be, the ruination of the industry, and it's a very manageable situation. So, and we live in, today we live in a very, very small world, and we kid ourselves if we think we're going to be able to eradicate any disease, whether it's plant, animal, or human. And so we're going to continue to see challenges as we move forward. How do we deal with, invasive pests and
Right.
diseases, plants, and it's not going to be eradication efforts. It's going to be how do we mitigate the impacts? How do we deal with the circumstances?
How do we live with it?
Yeah.
Right. No, I totally agree. So, in terms of your longevity with the organization, do you feel it's because you just love what you do, or is it just,
Well, when the association was formed in 1990, make sure I do the math right. I was a 32-year-old young citrus grower and was looking to get involved, and got involved with that. As you know, I got involved with some other stuff from Florida
Right.
Citrus Showcase and
Yep.
other things, and I was trying, because I did not come from a citrus family.
nor did I.
And
right?
it was, I wanted to make sure I was surrounding myself with a wide, range of influencers and folks that I could reach out to and understand and get to know. And so I wanted to be involved, and so I was tapped to be, I think now, the 4th president of the association, and got very involved, had to hire an executive director, and then I started doing some other stuff for a while, and about the time they needed a new director in the fall of 2001, our director, Miss Dunson, was moving on to something else, and so and about that same time we were getting ready to sell the bulk of our property to the state of Florida, so the guys came to me and said, would you like to run it? And So they placed a lot of faith in me. I appreciate that. I, mainly, I know I'm being long-winded. I mainly do it because I really enjoy the people I work with and for. I enjoy the interaction with local governments and stuff like that. And I think I'm making a difference, at least in some small ways. And so, as long as we can, we'll keep the association working very strongly on behalf of the men and women that grow citrus and are involved in agriculture in Highlands County. We've morphed a little bit in that we aren't just completely citrus oriented. We're helping people of all agricultural stripes, and so we understand that we're all in this together, and whether we're talking about water issues or nutrient issues or land use issues, it impacts all forms of agriculture, and so we have to be in this together.
Right. So you had said you're on the Economic Development Council too, so you're encompassing that and in just helping to manage what's happening with citrus lands, or what?
Well, and I got involved in the Industrial Development Authority, Economic Development Commission, because we know that there are things ancillary to citrus, and how do we bring complementary businesses in.
Got it.
And got involved, and I kind of now, they chose me to be the chair of that a year or two ago, and I'm also the chair of the Heartland Career Source Board, because we know we need a good workforce, we need better workforce training, and we recognize that even the training for the men and women that work in citrus is different than it was 20 years ago. So it used to be you'd hire a guy and, okay, there's the clutch and there's the brake and there's the gas pedal on a tractor. Now they got to be able to run the computer, the Dickie John system in the tractor. Now they're running automated equipment, and so we need a different level of employee that we used to have. We have to do things with fewer people in a smarter way, and we recognize also that we're competing with other folks for the best employees. Yeah. And I think that we also recognize that what keeps our county economically healthy is also good for those people that are growing food and fiber crops, and those folks that want to have long-term value for their property. And so it's kind of a complex web there that we're trying to help look after the best interests of the county from an economic development standpoint, make sure it's working. And so I've been involved in a lot of long-term planning with the Development Services Office and working with comp plans. And we want to make sure that the county develops right, number one, so that it doesn't preclude agricultural use, it doesn't interfere with it, but that we also can be part of that planning. So that's kind of been my job, is to stay very involved in a lot of things and understand the pulse of what's going on in our area.
Well, it definitely is going to help going forward, because we're doing nothing but having more and more people come into the state. So,
yeah, I mean, I think we heard today that basically Florida over the last 100 years, we've gone from in the last 100 years from 1 million people to 22 million people, which is 550, 600 people a day. Every day, basically, on average, for the last 100 years. And so there's going to be the conflict of, how do we
manage our resources.
Yeah, and as we sit here, I look out and I see Charles Shoemaker over there, and there's another man that's been involved in, Highlands County and the family for forever. And, he's here today learning, okay, how do I adapt my citrus holdings as I move forward. I don't know exactly how old Charles is.
He's in his 80s,
He's in his, I think, late 80s or so.
I know he's in his 80s now.
But he's another one of those very dynamic men that's been involved in our industry, and his family, again, another one of those long-term families that's been here for 100 years. So I know I keep coming back to that family theme, but that's been a lot of what we've seen, much like other parts of the state, where we have people that have everything from 10, 20 acre blocks to thousands of acres. And we don't have that many big corporate groves in our area.
Oh, that's right.
We still have a lot of those, family businesses that are growing citrus in our area.
Well, that's nice, because those are going by the wayside pretty quickly.
Right.
So it's scary.
And we're certainly seeing that consolidation.
Yes.
But, but there are people that are figuring out how to soldier on. How do we move forward?
Right.
How do we adapt to the new technologies? What do we need to do to grow a better tree. More importantly, how do we get fruit to hang on
To stay on it.
to harvest? So I mean, the good thing is there seems to be some technologies out there with the 2,4-Ds, the GAs of the world. Hopefully, trunk injection of oxytetracycline. So there may be some things that help us turn that corner. And some of the folks out there have learned how to grow a pretty good tree even in the presence of greening. Now, if we can just dramatically cut that fruit drop,
Yes.
we can do it. The market's out there. There's been a demonstrated desire for orange juice by society, and so the men and women that survive this are going to be well positioned into the future.
We might have to wait just a minute for them to get over. I can never understand what they're saying in that
No.
loudspeaker. I don't know why they bother. So I had to ask you this, because I know every spot has one. What's the lunch place everybody goes to talk shop?
Well, we have one in Lake Placid, the Smoke Shack. Unfortunately, had a fire and burn to the ground.
No.
So I think there's a couple different places that are getting around. It just kind of depends on what area you're working.
Yeah.
So
I
don't know that we have that small little, truck stop type
Right.
restaurant where everyone goes like they did 10, 15 years ago. Obviously, the Smoke Shack was doing some of that until they had their situation. I see a lot of folks go to the watering hole in Sebring,
Right.
or I see a lot of the guys, in the Sonny's barbecue. But, I think that what's interesting is we live in this.
It's not? I can't believe it's not picking that up. I can't hear though, so yeah, I can't hear it.
We live in an era where there aren't as many meetings, and people are, now that we all have a little mini computer strapped to our hip, folks are talking and Zooming, and maybe one of the things that's missing is that we don't have as many grower meetings, and there aren't as many, ideas being exchanged. But I will tell you, I still think that if people develop successful cultural practices, it's only a matter of days or weeks before they're sharing it, and people are adapting. So that's one of the beauties of our industry, is that there isn't really this competitive thing. It's how do we, certainly today, how do we all benefit from what one person's kind of started to figure out?
It's kind of changed, that's for sure. So, well, I appreciate you being with us here today. Is there anything you want to make sure we should talk about in Highlands County? Oh, they're looking for Miss Florida Citrus to come do the drawing, I think.
I think what's important, what's interesting to me, is that we are always going to have a pretty vibrant citrus industry in Highlands County. We aren't seeing, as I said earlier, the rapid decline in acreage like some other areas. And,
Okay.
we got a combination of, we're kind of 50-50 on being ridge and in flatwoods, and so we have multiple growing environments. And so I think that it's going to be an area that's going to continue to produce high quality citrus from our area. We're right there in the center of the state. So, I look forward to a strong future. I hope that you and I, 10 years from now, maybe we'll be talking about some other problem, and we'll say, boy, remember when greening was a problem? We'll put it in that blip category that I just
Let's hope so.
cavalierly put canker and
And all the freezes
and
the,
all
the
that
leaf
in.
miner, yes.
Yeah, and it's strange, we actually had this January, we actually had two pretty good little freeze events in Highlands County that caused more damage than we certainly anticipated. But it's almost an afterthought now that with the seriousness of greening, the cold that did quite a bit of damage almost didn't register as a negative event in the grand scheme of things.
Wow.
Which is kind of sad in a way.
It is, because that was all, as you live and die by the freezes, it seemed
Right.
like. So that was everybody's attention was always on the thermometer, but
Right.
now it's the HLB. So
Exactly.
hopefully we can get past that. So But thank you. Appreciate you being here. And